Power Automate is marketed as an accessible, drag-and-drop platform. This allows users to build automation by connecting visual blocks on a canvas. However, feeding unpredictable data into a workflow built strictly with these UI steps often results in a bloated structure. Without underlying logic, the workflow cannot handle data variance. When an API response is delayed or a SharePoint field is missing, these visual-only flows fail, lacking the logic to handle the exception. The programmatic expression engine is the actual mechanism required to process complex APIs and transform Dataverse rows. Mastering these expressions allows a developer to move beyond basic automation and build enterprise-grade systems. Navigating this programmatic layer requires a precise reference for the available functions. This reference guide catalogs the tools used to calculate, transform, and control data. The document progresses from foundational text and math operations at the top, through specialized JSON processing, and down to expert tips and common patterns. We will deconstruct 5 real-world enterprise patterns from this guide to see how they provide a defensive architecture for your data. Applying these patterns correctly prevents silent logic failures in production environments. Defensive design assumes that production data is often inconsistent and API properties will occasionally be missing. Power Automate distinguishes between an empty string, which is a known value, and a null value, which indicates the data does not exist. Mistaking one for the other typically causes the workflow to terminate. The empty function evaluates whether a variable or output contains any data, allowing the workflow to identify structural gaps before they cause an error. The coalesce function acts as a defensive shield by evaluating a sequence of arguments. Here, the trigger body's name property is wrapped in coalesce. If omitted from the incoming API payload, the function returns the string unknown instead of a null error. Using these functions at the data ingestion layer catches errors before they can corrupt downstream systems. Power Automate executes and records time strictly in Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC. Using the raw UTC now function without conversion often results in dates being recorded a day early or late, depending on the local business time zone. The convert time zone function shifts the raw UTC input to a specific destination, such as Eastern Standard Time. After shifting the time zone, the format date time function applies a formatting mask to ensure the month, day, and hour are displayed correctly. This formatting provides a consistent, readable date for Microsoft Teams alerts and Outlook email notifications. Enforcing temporal precision maintains data integrity and prevents miscommunication in automated approval cycles. Workflows must also navigate large arrays and JSON payloads from sources like SharePoint and Microsoft Forms. The outputs function retrieves the full response from a previous action, while the body and trigger body functions target the specific data payload. To access a specific property during a loop, the items function is used with the name of the apply to each action to retrieve the value for the current record. Validating that an array contains data is a requirement before using functions like first or last, as targeting an empty array will cause a failure. The union function is used to combine arrays, and it automatically removes duplicate records during the process. Consistent payload parsing ensures data uniformity when merging information from different sources. Effective workflow design also depends on macro architecture, how the components are organized for long-term maintenance. Professional workflows utilize modular components arranged in a structured grid. Deeply nested expressions inside a single action are difficult to test and debug. The compose action strategy involves placing complex logic into clearly named actions. This allows you to store a calculation once and reference it later, which reduces API calls. When referencing these actions in an expression, any spaces in the action name must be replaced with underscores. Scopes are used to group these actions into try, catch, and finally blocks. By configuring the run after settings, you can control how the workflow handles timeouts and failures. Isolating logic within scopes creates a modular architecture that is easier to test and more resilient to runtime errors. Production-grade automation is built on the assumption that external data and APIs will occasionally be malformed. Because of this, enterprise technical interviews focus on the functions used to handle these data challenges. Critical functions for production environments include concat for strings, UTC now, and format date time for temporal logic, coalesce for null handling, split for arrays, and GUID for unique identifiers. These functions provide the control required to build secure, environment-agnostic systems that perform consistently. Further technical templates and reference materials are available through Share MS Tech Solutions. Proficiency with the expression engine allows for the engineering of resilient logic capable of handling the variables of a production environment.